So Lori, talk to us about the power of film.
Well, I think film is uniquely powerful. I think it is sort of the common public literature of our day, and people who don't necessarily read books or have time to read the paper or participate in sort of the sort of traditional ways of learning about things, they still go to see movies. Everybody owns the movies. Everybody cares about the movies. And I want to sort of expand my comments. Everything I'm talking about, I'm not really limiting myself to documentary film, although I did just make a documentary film. I'm also I'm a screenwriter and actually a narrative filmmaker. This was a departure for me, only because I thought it was the best way to tell this story. I thought once I did my research, I realized that if I tried to translate the stories I was finding into a traditional screenplay, people wouldn't believe it because it was so shocking. So I realized that documentary really was the way we had to go with this. But I think non-documentary filmmaking can also be immensely persuasive in changing hearts and minds and getting people to connect to stories. And everything we've seen, we've taken the film now to places that are staunchly kind of politically opposed to some of our messaging. Really conservative parts of the country, even like Tea Party strongholds. And when you speak to the people in these communities, they're kind of convinced, maybe not, usually not. They'll attack your sources or your data. But when you show them people, lives, that police officer whose family relies on charity food, that mom who wants to go to college and is such a great parent but spends all of her extra energy and resources scrambling for food instead of parenting, working, and all the things she could be doing in her community, people's hearts are engaged and they become involved in a way that is far more persuasive than if they read about it, or certainly than if they read about it in a statistical or data-driven way. And we found that the stories themselves, people do a 180. They come on board, they say, oh my goodness, how can we get involved? So I think it's an extremely persuasive and powerful medium for social change. It's why I got involved in it in the first place. I really believed in storytelling as a way to change the public's ideas about what is possible and to persuade people that we're far more similar than different. And the people that we kind of judge or think of as the other, if you spend 82 minutes, that's how long our movie is, in a darkened room with just a little popcorn or no distractions, you actually end up having a very vicarious experience. You're really walking in that person's shoes, and when the lights come up, you are in a different place than when you sat down, and that's the place where change can happen.
Talk to us for a second about funding films. When I was president of the Rosenberg Foundation in California, we were a long-time funder of film projects. We prided ourselves in getting in early. It was also the smallest grants that we gave and the ones that we did least often. What's it like for you when you've got a big idea, you want to make impact in the world, and you got to raise money for a film?
Well, it's tough. I'm not going to lie. And I think because I'm an independent filmmaker, when you're working within the studio system, it's 100% different. But it's tough, but it's changing. I think a place at the table has actually started to change things for a lot of filmmakers from what I'm hearing, because we funded this film through a combination of private and studio money. And by studio, I don't mean one of the big studios. I mean Participant Media, that was founded by Jeff Skoll, who's not an unfamiliar name in this room. And they pride themselves on, their entire brand is predicated on getting involved in films that change conversations and push issues forward. So it was really hard, it was a long process, but once Participant came on board, we were funded, we were ready to go. But what we found is that the film itself has ignited a movement, and we are really starting to, it has, beyond its traditional distribution in the theaters, it now is having this incredibly robust grassroots distribution, and it's showing at universities and medical schools and food policy groups. Food policy groups are forming in response to the film. So we're seeing that people are getting involved in food and hunger in a way that is radically different than the typical canned food drive they might have been inspired to do before seeing the movie. And so it's having a domino and ripple effect. And I think because of that, opportunities, people are starting to think about film as a way to advance social issues, and not just sort of an educational or an entertainment vehicle. And you know, for people in the room who find the idea of getting involved in filmmaking as a vehicle for social change, I'd like to stress it's not just about funding the film itself, which it's sometimes hard to find filmmakers at that very early stage. You know, we're kind of not, these are not conversations that traditionally happen. Filmmakers are not often in rooms with funders who are doing philanthropy. It's just a new paradigm. But one of the things we did in making a place at the table was we were very interested from the beginning, before we ever shot a frame, in building an action campaign to accompany the film itself. And so we never did any filmmaking without always thinking about how we could create an outreach, educational engagement campaign for the public to go alongside with the release. We always thought forward that way. And
Can you tell folks for a second how many people saw the film? I was trying to find that fact, but how many people saw the film?
Oh, I have no idea. You'd have to ask the distributor. I really don't know. And honestly, because they released it into theaters, it was released in about 40 cities at its height of its traditional theatrical release. It also was released on demand at the same time, which I don't know how they measure that exactly. Although somebody at Magnolia, who released the film, might have those answers. It also ended up, we had our DVD release in June, and now it's on Netflix. And now our second wave of distribution, which is all community and educational, and it's vast. It's playing all over the country. I couldn't even tell you all the places. And that's being handled by a different distributor who just does that. So it's really getting seen widely, and it has a domino effect. So the Council of University Presidents is screening it, and then they're setting up screenings on hundreds of campuses, and at each of these campuses, young people are getting engaged and saying, we want to start our own food policy council, we want to start and then going off sometimes to show the film in their own network. So it's hard to quantify. So
it's gone viral in a very...
In a certain sense, it has, so that's really exciting. But what I'm trying to point out is that many films, after they're done, have a campaign that itself desperately needs funding and support. It is not enough to make a film and hope people see it. You have to do a robust support of getting it out there in a way that will get seen by as many eyes as possible and then can affect change. So, for example, with our film, we have, in partnership with Participant, but also very much on our own, we're saying, how do we scale the message of this movie out beyond the theater? So that people who are, in parts of the country that don't have an indie theater that's going to show documentary, or people who don't necessarily have Netflix, or we want the message of the movie to get out widely scaled across the country. And so now it's really exciting. Our campaign is partnering with some really big players in the world of media to take the messaging and scale it outward across the country. And that's the kind of thing that foundations can really make a difference with.
So quick final question.
Yeah.
How in this film, tell us about how you made sure that people left the film knowing what to do.
That's a really tough thing for filmmakers, and as I mentioned to you earlier, it's sort of a filmmaking question. I think it depends on the film. In the case of A Place at the Table, we gave people, the moment the film is over, there's this very emotionally, just very deep, resonant, emotional moment where people are feeling incredibly invested, inspired, and moved. And at that moment, boom, we shot across the screen, every American deserves a place at the table. 50 million Americans live do not have enough to eat in a country with more than enough food. Text the word food to 77177 to find out how you can help change this. And by doing that, you were automatically linked into our campaign that gave you up-to-the-minute insight into what's happening in the issue, ways to get involved, ways to put pressure on legislators, ways to engage yourself in policy discussions. So we gave people something at that moment. I think other films can do it in a far more subtle and sort of nuanced storytelling way, just by making the solution part of the story, for example, in a narrative film. So I don't think there's one way to do that.
Well, and could you tell folks again, just in case they want to see how you're doing this, what they text food to?
So I would say that is, you can text the word food to 77177. But I would also encourage you, I have my colleague Tiffany Brown, who is running our outreach campaign, is coordinating all of this, is here. So come see her after this if you want to learn more, because the campaign to take this broadly to the American public and engage and involve as many Americans as possible in how to actually end hunger, because it's eminently solvable if enough Americans sign on.
That's right.
That's the thing that we can even talk more about. That's in process now. Tiffany's here to help me with that, and we're happy to talk to anybody about
That's great. That. And by the way, folks, if you haven't called your congressman or your senator this week, do so, because if they don't act by Friday, 21 meals get cut out of a family's life who's surviving on food stamps right now. And so this issue is urgent even this week. It's really urgent. And if you want to have a further return on investment beyond even just that one call, but be able to impact the future of this issue, we are right now figuring out exactly how to do that and partnering with some great people, and we'll happily tell you about that too. So text food to 77177 or talk to Tiffany Brown. Yeah. So Pamela Schiffman, the Novo Foundation. Talk to us. Well, we're going to watch the video, and this is great, by the way. I think that Berta and Michelle and Patricia have done a great job of really giving us kind of two ways to communicate here. But when we get back from watching the video, we're going to want to talk about what you did back in 2008 when y'all partnered with the Nike Foundation to launch the Girl Effect campaign, about the potential, the power, as my 7-year-old daughter would say, the girl power, to end poverty. But let's watch this.